Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Hello, everyone. It is Jen from Sundae Baubles, and I am thrilled to see you all here today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I am wearing my obligatory green. Got a peridot brooch on. What else do I have on? I have some opals that are quite green in nature and a green sweater. So hopefully that will make sure that I don't get pinched. Have you ever heard that? You get pinched if you don't wear green? Apparently it doesn't actually happen in Ireland, but in Canada, sometimes it does. It is great to see you all. We have a wonderful topic today. Costume jewelry versus fine jewelry. What is the difference? And I would be doing you all a disservice if we didn't go through the history of how costume jewelry came to be. So that is what this first part of our deep dive into costume jewelry is going to be all about today. It is wonderful to see you all. Hello, Lexi, Monica, Lisa. I see Brie, ha ha ha. Elizabeth, Charlene, Deborah, another Deborah, Hannah, Catherine, Sue. Let's see. I see Jane, Bonnie. So many folks already here. Welcome, welcome. Please make sure that you type #win all caps for your chance to win a mug. And we will make sure that we do that draw, and it could be your lucky day. It is a lucky day for most, or it should be a lucky day for everyone. So let's just will that into being. Hello, Donna, Delia. It is wonderful to see you all. So in terms of a little bit of housekeeping, I do have a couple of extra warm welcomes that I have to share. There's been a few of you that have joined the Extra Scoop Club, and I'll just quickly go over what that is. It is an extra access community that we have that is membership based, and you can either join on YouTube or you can join on Patreon, and it gets you access into some additional videos that we do where it's like an Antiques Roadshow deep dive into your pieces, as well as Zoom meetups too. Our next Jewelry Roadshow is actually scheduled for today at 2 p.m. PST, 5 p.m. Eastern, and I do want to make sure that we give a very warm welcome to Bonnie, Jane. 3 Janes joined in the last week, which is amazing. It is a beautiful name, popular name, spelt different ways too. Coel, Lily, Pong, Rachel, Carol, Melody, Charlene. Thank you all so much. It is wonderful to have you with us. And I'm not going to waste too much time before we jump right into our topic, but I do want to make sure that I say hello. Hello, Karen. Hello, Lee, Cindy, Mona. I hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. Now, there's not a lot of people who can easily point to a piece of jewelry and say costume or fine without picking it up. And that's for good reason. You need to know what the materials are. You need to know how it was made. There's so much to it. And this is why we all need to use all of our senses whenever we look at jewelry. But the question becomes, does it even really matter? Is there a major value difference between the two? Well, as we are going to cover today, costume jewelry is an idea that came about in the 20th century. Jewelry used to be just jewelry. So let's dive in. We're going to start by talking about the overlap between the two categories. In the world of fine, we have some pretty specific ideas as to what it includes. Precious metals, of course, including gold, silver, platinum, and gemstones. And in the world of costume, usually this is a base metal. It can include brass, copper, aluminum, glass, and plastics as well. But where things get confusing is that center section. I call it the confusion area. And some people wonder, what about synthetic stones or plated metals or mixed materials? Does a designer name actually have any impact? this is what we are going to talk about today. Now, most people do agree with the general overview of base metals, glass and plastics being costume, and gold, silver, and platinum, as well as precious gemstones when combined, are going to be considered fine. But the question is, why is there this confusion? Well, it's because the standards to what equals luxury have changed over time. It seems like a really simple explanation, but if you think about it, jewelry used to just be jewelry. If we go back 2,000 years, metal was not accessible to just everyone. It was really only the rulers that had access, and so they were privileged and they were able to wear jewelry. As we fast forward, the more materials became accessible and the more that things were automated, making things developed and created and available, that started to make them more mainstream. And some might say this devalues the item, or maybe it simply popularizes it and makes it into a trend. Let's jump in, and we're going to explore how the standards of luxury have changed and why they have changed. The first most important thing we need to do is to talk about the 4 factors that can actually impact these trends. We've got innovation, material, construction, and history. All of these, in the context of jewelry, can impact its desirability. And so we're going to go into a bit of a deep dive into what changed over time to evolve this idea of jewelry into being in categories such as fine and costume. We're going to start with geographic expansion and discoveries. Now, in 1511, King Ferdinand of Spain declared that he wanted to send out a fleet to get gold humanely if possible, but at all hazards, get gold. Gold was considered to be extremely important. It was something that Spain actually ended up controlling for a couple of centuries while they had their armada and their fleet. And gold is exactly what they were after. It was something that was used primarily by royalty, and they controlled it. And it really wasn't until the 19th century when there were some more important gold discoveries that started to make gold even more accessible to the masses and started to create wealth where maybe it hadn't been before. So some of our very important gold discoveries and gold deposits include California and the Great Gold Rush of 1848. In Australia, it was found in 1852, interestingly, by someone who had recognized that the landscape in California was very, very similar to that in Australia. And Queen Victoria was so excited that she granted this person a pension of $10,000 a year for the rest of their life because it was expanding the wealth of her empire. In Johannesburg, there was an incredible discovery in 1866. In Belgium, it wasn't that there was gold that was discovered there. However, the king was forced to hand over his Congolese gold interests, and this in turn made Belgium a very gold-rich nation. And of course, we have the Klondike Strike of 1896 as well. So gold, as it became more available, became much more visible and much more used in jewelry and used by other classes too. Now, we also have to talk about precious gemstones. Today, we think about diamond, emerald, ruby, and sapphire as being the most precious of all gemstones. But in world history, they were not always readily available. And so other stones that were hard to find but equally beautiful and could be polished up became very, very important. So in the Georgian period, for example, we have an example here, beautiful agate, and in this case, it's dendritic agate that was paired with rubies and also paired with gold. And agate was thought to be incredibly precious. Amethysts, because there weren't many deposits, were also extremely popular. Now, both of these things were sometimes emulated in jewelry. Because amethysts weren't readily available until South America was explored and deposits of minerals discovered there, often glass was used, and it would be either purple glass that was foiled back or clear glass with purple foil, and that would be your amethysts. And while agates are still popular today, when we look at them in the context of antique jewelry, they were truly considered to be incredibly precious. Whereas today, sometimes we think a little bit just of an agate being an agate and nothing more, but it's so much more. Now, the political and economic changes of the time also had some important impacts. And what do I mean like this? Well, if we consider the machine age coming out of the Industrial Revolution, there were incredible impacts to technology. However, it's important to recognize that this time of wealth, right at the turn of the 20th century, so around 1900, and the rising merchant classes that was coming from the Industrial Revolution didn't last forever. So this was indeed the Gilded Age, an age of opulence. But with the onset of World War I, there became a resurgence and requirement to repurpose different materials, technology, manpower, sending men to war. And while the goods were very bountiful after the First World War, there was a resurgence in production. They were mass produced, and there became an excess. Yes, there was a return to parties and freedom after war, but the gains of productivity that were found are actually what spurred on the Great Depression. So there was a market crash in 1929, and then that impacted everyone really, really hard until 1933. And truly, production wasn't ramped up again in the same way until 1939, supporting the efforts worldwide for World War II. So it's important to take a look at this, to think about, where was money available, who had it, and how was it being used? In the early part, really it was those merchant classes, the Nouveau riche, that had more money than ever before, and they were spending it. The middle class still had a disparity, but they had wages and they were able to buy some jewelry too. And with all of that gold that had been discovered, it was able to be used, and you see it in the common man's jewelry as well. Now, technology also impacted jewelry innovations, and there were a couple of important innovations that we're going to talk about. First up, synthetic gemstone developments. Believe it or not, synthetic gemstones have been around since 1819. Now, the very first synthetic gemstones were created inadvertently by melting two rubies together to form a new stone. And the person that did that, Clark, didn't realize that it still had a crystalline matrix to it, so he didn't consider it to be a true gemstone. It wasn't until 1837 that a chemist determined that it was in fact a gemstone, and it wasn't until 1851 where they were truly used. In 1877, clear sapphires were produced in labs, and it was found that by adding chromium, you would be able to then color them and turn them into rubies. And then by the 1880s, this is where we start to see these synthetic rubies appear in jewelry. And they were known as Geneva rubies because they were predominantly created in Switzerland. And then finally, we have many, many more developments from the turn of the century onward. Back in the 1880s, synthetic rubies were incredibly expensive, $200 to $320 a carat. Whereas once the Nouveau process was invented, the price started to come down to $100 to $250 a carat. And all of this, again, impacted the availability. Now, we must talk about some of the other innovations, because it wasn't just innovations that were meant to be purely for jewelry. As you all know, in the Victorian era, black was a very important color for mourning. And Charles Goodyear invented vulcanite, a rubber that his brother then modified, and it was used in dentistry. But this was also used to mold and create all sorts of mourning jewelry as well. The oxyacetylene torch was invented in 1901, and this allowed the creation of beautiful light filigree with platinum. Before the torch, it was very difficult to work with platinum, and this spurred the entire white-on-white look that was going to inspire the Edwardians. And then the diamond saw was invented in 1903. So until this point, the motor was not spinning fast enough to give the right sort of specific and explicit facets. And in 1903, with its invention, the whole shaping of a diamond began to evolve. The old mine cuts, as well as the old European cuts, were beautiful and they captured light, but you could be more specific with the measurements. And Tolsky came out with his perfect ratios as to how these facets should be created, and that created the ideal cut. Bakelite was invented in 1907 by Leo Hendrik Baekeland, and of course this continued to evolve into Pristyle, and we start to see a lot of new materials in jewelry in the 20th century, with plastics, celluloids, and other pieces as well. And then finally, we have dye stamping introduced in 1910 that was used to also create that filigree look with less effort. So think about it as sort of filigree with automation, and it was considered to be one of the strongest forms to create these beautiful, airy designs in rings. So as you can see, there's been a lot of evolutions, and I think you're probably starting to have some twinkles in your eyes as you recognize that these technology inventions, as well as the availability of material, is what started to shift what was seen in jewelry. Now, another important factor, we did touch on it, is war. War shifts everything. It shifts the landscape of production, how people are producing materials, what it is that they're doing with their time. And the onset of war really pushed for an evolution in white metal, especially as used in jewelry. Platinum was very popular during that Edwardian period. And around 1913, we had Carl Richter, who filed a patent for white gold, and David Belay in 1921. And this is because platinum was going to be reserved for the war effort. So it was really important that they find something that was going to satisfy the masses if they could. And that is really what created the need to invent it. Rhodium platings came about in the 1920s and became very commonplace in the 1930s. And then palladium was introduced in 1942. Now, war didn't just impact the 20th century. We do need to talk about Berlin iron. So we're going to touch on this for just a second. In 1813 to 1815, the Prussian royal family urged all of their citizens to donate their gold and silver for the War of Liberation against Napoleon. And if you did donate your gold or your silver, you would be given some jewelry instead that was made in iron. And it was sometimes brooches, sometimes rings. It would be inscribed with, "I gave gold for iron." And we'll take a look at just a couple of pieces. This is one necklace and another. And this happened twice in history. It happened in that 1813 to 1815 period and denoted that you were very patriotic if you were wearing this black, darkened with linseed oil jewelry. But again, 1914 through 1916, there was another drive. So this is a later example of a ring. So it's fascinating to see how war will also impact jewelry. Now the question becomes, why does this matter? Well, the costume jewelry concept is something that truly came about in about the 1920s. And the reason for this was because costume jewelry was something that was seen being worn by starlets and then emulated. We're going to go through a few examples as to what exactly that means. But jewelry is jewelry is jewelry. So if we look back at history, the materials that it's made of and the importance and significance that it has much more to do with the environment that was in, who produced it, how it was worn, and why it was worn as well. So it's really fascinating to look back and understand, because glass is not less important than any other piece. Perhaps the value is different, but at the time when it was worn, such as in the Georgian period, where even the royalty sometimes had glass or paste mixed in with their diamonds, it was just important to show up with sparkling pieces. And glass jewelry back then was very expensive. It took a lot of money to be able to have the means to have a jeweler make you anything, no matter what it was made from. So again, why it matters is because the affordability of jewelry has always had an impact on how it was produced. Keep this in mind, and we're going to take a little walk through history and take a look at some specific examples. We'll start with the Georgian period. The question is, who wore jewels in the Georgian period? This selection gives you a really nice little snapshot because these jewels are about status. If you went on a grand tour and you had a micro mosaic, as we see in the top left corner, then that meant that you were enlightened, you were educated, and you traveled. You had means. Similarly, if you had an amethyst, it meant that you had some wealth. There's chrysoberyl showcased there as well. In the middle of the bottom row, we have a gentleman's button, and this button is made with pastes, and it shines like no tomorrow. Now, all of these cuts that we see of any stone were meant to shine in the low lights because, of course, electricity was not there. So again, in the Georgian period, if you had jewelry, it meant that you had means to afford it and access. As we move into the Victorian period, and again, think about the expansion, the globalization, and the changes in trends, jewelry took on a very different purpose. It still had to do with status, but it also had meaning, both hidden and overt. So in these examples, we have pieces of all different values, but the key is they do have messages. We've got on the bottom right, the micro mosaic in glass with flowers. These are meant to be roses and meant to showcase love. At the very top of the right, we have a beautiful vulcanite brooch. And again, this would likely have been worn by somebody who was in mourning, who wasn't able to wear colors. In the very center, again, another lover's knot, as well as on the bottom left. And these were very sentimental pieces. They were jewels of love, as was the garnet as well. And garnet showcased again in both the cluster brooch as well as that center brooch. So these are a nod to sentimentality. And there's also a nod to history in Victorian jewelry, a nod back into the Etruscan revival, as well as a lot of the archaeological digs and findings. And this is no different than what we saw in the Georgian period, and no different than what we are going to see in other periods as well. Now, in the Edwardian period, light, bright, anti-oppressive Victorian mourning jewelry was key. Now, that period is known for white on white, and I have not showcased a lot of white on white other than my platinum engagement ring, but I did want to showcase the laciness as well as the return to nature. And that was what was important to the Edwardians. They wanted to shed off the heaviness of the Victorian period. The Art Deco jewelry here is again vibrant and showcases freedom. So after the years of war, there is a desire for color, and I've showcased a lot more glass pieces as well as some carnelian. We do have silver and gold here as well, but the jewelry of the period really spoke to the desire to have some of that wonderful color. And even through the Depression era, where women could, they would create long necklaces for themselves, sometimes out of seeds or, anything that they had access to sort of dress up their more drab outfits as finances became a major concern for everyone. The retro to modern period, here we've showcased again, after another war period, the return to the bright and vibrant color of gold, as well as patriotism. And we have a mix here of fine and costume jewelry, all of it equally important in its own right. So as you can see, the trends are really set by pop culture, by what is happening in the world, what the designers are thinking about, what their customers are asking for. And there's a reason why this happens. In part, it's because of the way that news travels. So if we think back to the Victorian period, if there was no television, there were no films. You would learn of the fashion and the tone was set by royalty, and you would sometimes see portraits or caricatures in prints, and that's about it. Magazines became more commonplace, and that started to showcase royalty as well as sometimes stars, like theater stars. And then as we move into the 20th century and start to think about the film stars, beginning with silent films and then the talkies, where there was actually talking, those stars began to set the tone based on the costumes that they would wear, and people would want to emulate their looks. Let's take a look at some examples. We've got Myrna Loy. She was in silent films and also some talking films later on in her career. And this is an image of her around 1925. And she is wearing stacks on stacks of bracelets. And these, if we could see them, were the white on white. So either silver filigree or a chrome plated filigree, as well as having some stones inset too, often glass. We've got Coco Chanel. Now, she really set the world's heart aflutter for pearls, and she loved pearls, both faux and real. She had been gifted some pearls by a lover, and she decided that she wanted even more and even bigger. And so this is where she produced her own lines with a lot of large pearls. And these took the world by storm and started to set the tone for what classy jewelry can look like for women. We have Louise Brooks, and this is an image of her in the Canary murder case from 1929, just covered in strands upon strands of pearls. And then we've got a later image of Vivian Leigh in Gone with the Wind. And in this case, she's wearing a coral necklace. And this was produced by Joseph of Hollywood. I'm going to pause here for a second because the economics of wearing jewelry in film did not allow for companies to simply buy the real thing so that their stars could wear it. And so Joseph of Hollywood began to fill that niche because he would produce the most amazing replicas of historically somewhat accurate pieces, sometimes fantastical, and these would be worn. Eventually, this created a very profitable business for him. Here is an image of Marlene Dietrich, and she is on a war bond selling tour in this image wearing lots of jewelry. This is 1942, and she's wearing faux pearls, a wide sterling bangle, and Cartier earrings. So it's interesting to see that even the rich and the well-known would mix what is known as costume and fine together to create their desired look. No one was thinking about this in the terms of one is better than the other. These complemented the looks. Here we have Marilyn Monroe, and this is an image from the film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes from 1953. And costume jewelry designers, as they were known very well by that point in time, would create those same looks so that customers would be able to wear these looks. And we've got an unsigned mid-century example of exactly that piece. We must give a nod to Jackie O. She was known for wearing both real and faux pearls as well. It's said that her 3-strand of pearls were always faux, whereas some of her other strands were real. And Elizabeth Taylor. This is from the VIPs in 1963. And in it, she's actually wearing a piece of her own jewelry. And she was known to do this. She loved jewelry. Everyone knew it. Richard Burton had gifted her this sapphire and diamond brooch. And she decided that it was appropriate for her costume. And Barb has shared a very important comment. Thank you so much, Barb O'Donnell. Joseph of Hollywood actually rented his jewelry. So sometimes you would see the same jewelry in different movies, which is a fascinating little tidbit and an Easter egg to watch out for if you're watching some wonderful old movies. Very, very collectible, even the lines that were produced for purchase. Here is an example of Elizabeth Taylor when she was Cleopatra in 1963, and here wearing one of Joseph's wonderful serpent bangles. And it said that these may be the bangles that sort of set her afire for the Bulgari Serpenti line. Here she is in Boom, again wearing a precious gemstone Bulgari brooch, complementing her outfits with the jewels and luxury that she owns. So it does go both ways. And then, of course, Elizabeth Taylor had a collaboration with Avon around 1993. And she used inspiration from her movies and from her jewelry loves. And this is one of my very favorites. And I have two of these cuffs actually in two different sizes. But she did her best to create somewhat historically accurate representations inspired with a bit of fantasy. And in theory, these would be considered costume jewelry, but they are plated in 22 karat gold. So it's base metal in gold. It's really quite beautiful pieces. Now, what's fascinating is that these revival designs were not just used in the Victorian or Georgian age or in costume jewelry. Things always look back. So what I wanted to share with you is a couple of fascinating examples. We've got the Elizabeth Taylor bangle that she created for Avon. So again, 22 karat gold over base metal. And next to it, we have an authentic antique Assyrian revival bangle. While they're in no way, shape, or form identical, you can absolutely see the inspiration. And it is wonderful to see the amount of care that goes into either costume or fine jewelry. It is fascinating because a creator is not less than based on the materials that they're using. We also have an example here where there's an Art Deco revival book chain. Again, this one is Egyptian revival inspired, and it is very similar to an antique Victorian silver book chain. If we take a look at the links, in that Art Deco Victorian revival period, they really did do a fantastic job at taking inspiration, taking design elements, and then making them something special and their own. And we will take a look at this. So Florenza, a costume jewelry company, is also very, very well known for making pieces that, excuse me, draw inspiration from antiques. And they took great care in choosing the materials, stones or glass, as well as all of the workmanship to try to emulate these antique pieces. Here we have a Florenza brooch that is set with faux turquoise, as well as garnet and pearls. And next to it, we have the authentic antique brooch made of gold, coral, and garnet. Now, both are amazing and would be very attractive and look wonderful on any outfit. And the appeal of costume designs is that they're a little bit more widely available to the masses because the antique is going to be essentially a one of one or one of very few, whereas these makers were making looks accessible to more people. So let's go back to define fine versus costume. We do have that overlap of confusion, and we're going to go right in there right now. So synthetic stones, plated metals, mixed materials, and designer names. Where do they stand? The answer is that it really depends on the piece as a whole, and we'll dive into each one. In terms of stones, both costume and fine pieces are going to find natural and synthetic stones in them. You can definitely have a gold ring with a piece of glass. In the Georgian period, sometimes they would put opaline in gold, for example, because it was considered to be extremely rare and it was very beautiful. And you can see examples of other stones or natural materials in base metals too. Here, we will go with a couple of examples in just a second, but the important part when there's mixed materials is to consider each component as a part of the whole. So when you're thinking about jewelry, it isn't just a quick, dry answer of what it is. We have an example here of coral in brass and then glass in gold and silver. Now, the coral and brass, in theory, would be considered costume, but this is an antique piece. And when it was worn, it was simply jewelry and a special piece of jewelry that a lot of labor went into making. The glass in gold and silver, this is a Georgian ring, and it is an example that does have some opaline as well as some paste stones. And again, While not diamonds, this was still considered an important piece of jewelry for someone to own that would have taken a lot of work. Now, plated metals is one of the most confusing areas, and one of the areas where there is some consensus. Vermeil, or gold over silver, is considered fine because solid gold and solid silver are considered fine, but gold-plated base metal is not. That said, it's important to consider the piece and who wore it, and it does not make it less than. It simply could impact the intrinsic value based on materials. And finally, designer or brand name. Does it matter? Well, the answer is that designers and brand names created both fine and costume jewelry, and you can find hallmarked or branded pieces from centuries ago as well as today. Now, if we take a look at some examples, we've got Lagerfeld for Chanel, and this is a gold-plated base metal necklace, and then the Cartier Love Gold necklace. The Lagerfeld for Chanel necklace is available on sale on First Dibs for about $795. Now, this was a limited collaboration, and even though it's base metal and is plated with gold, it is considered highly collectible, and collectors definitely have a market for these things. The Cartier Love Gold necklace is available for about $20,000. If you take a look at the intrinsic value of gold and simply the weight of the gold and what spot prices are, this is astronomical. So again, you are really paying for that collectability, for the name. And this is where something about jewelry that has not changed is that it certainly can be used to denote status. And whether that is something that you are attracted to and want to partake in or not, doesn't matter. If you collect what is in your heart and what your means can afford, and always keep your eyes out. And this is why sometimes you are able to find very, very special pieces in places like pawn shops or thrift shops or flea markets, because not everybody holds them with the same value. And so, as with anything, we are the ones that create the value that an item holds. It's the market that's going to determine what it sells for. So, fine. Everyone agrees precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, and gemstones, which absolutely can include synthetic. And then for base, we have brass, copper, and aluminum, glass, and plastics. And I think that we've cleared up some of the area of confusion. Now, when we think about value and collectability, aside from going with what is in your heart and what you want, if you are thinking about reselling, or if you're thinking about trying to get the best bang for your buck in terms of investments, take a look at this little Venn diagram, because wherever you can find the maximum intersections is likely where the most value is going to be. But of course, always go for what is in your heart. So here we have the maker or designer, the material, construction, and scarcity. And scarcity can be both because of the lack of availability of materials. So for example, natural alexandrite is very expensive, it is hard to find, or it could be a one-off unique piece, which has less to do with the materials. So this really is that Venn diagram that allows you to understand, why is it sometimes that pieces that you wouldn't expect to have such high value can go for so very, very much. And in the world of jewelry collecting, I'm sure that you've all come across the experience of seeing jewelry pieces that are costume because they are base metal with perhaps glass, but they sell for thousands of dollars. And that is because they sit under that designer and scarcity sort of stamp. Now, I would be remiss to not share a great resource for costume jewelry. This is our first talk about the history and how it impacts value. And the CJCI, or Costume Jewelry Collectors International, offers some wonderful information, including all sorts of resources on makers' marks, the evolution of the marks they used, the different makers, the timeframes in which they worked, and how they worked, and who they worked with. And so I don't want to leave you hanging, and I will give you this website right now, and I will also link it into this video. It is costumejewelrycollectors.com. And if you do have a mark that you want to look up, this is a great place to go. But something that we will be talking about in an upcoming video is going to be how to research the makers. We'll talk about some of the key makers that you have probably heard of, why they're important, and how they fit into that whole socio-political, economic, and cultural landscape in the 20th century. And then we're also going to talk about unsigned beauties and how you can use the special details on costume pieces in order to identify them. So that is going to be in a video that is upcoming. It's a lot to digest, and it takes some time to put these together. So thank you for bearing with me. But costume jewelry is as important as fine jewelry in many ways. And so I want to make sure that we do justice to this topic. And I'm going to pop into the chat and see how everybody is doing. Do make sure that you enter the giveaway. I'm going to put the banner at the bottom now so that you have a chance to win a fantastic exclusive Sundae Baubles Sundae Brunch mug. And it is my gift to the winner. I take care of all of the shipping. You don't have to worry about anything. I'm going to catch up on the comments now. And let's see. Yes, Avon actually has made some really incredible pieces. And this is where it is shocking to see who has made what, who partners with whom, the quality sometimes of the factories, even some of the more modern costume jewelry too. So when you're thinking about investing in jewelry, it's always worth asking yourself, what is it that I need this piece for? Is it meant to be a heirloom? You say the word however you like. Or is it a one-off accessory that I need for an event, and I just need something that's going to give me that look and jazz up my outfit, and that is all. Barb, I see you have a comment saying that you have a 18 karat band marked ballet. I think I may have missed some of a conversation, but that is fantastic. Ballet was actually one of the names that became intertwined with white gold. So they actually would advertise like ballet gold as white gold, which is fascinating. All right. I think I am caught up. Jeweler Jam, I fully agree. Avon jewelry does not get all of the attention that it deserves. Okay, so please do type #win in all caps, and we will make sure that we do our draw. I'm going to check and see. We've got 37 entries, so we will do that very soon. But before we do that, I am going to do a membership giveaway as well. So we always give away 5 memberships to the Extra Scoop Club, and I'm just going to really quickly put a reminder up, because if you do happen to be gifted a membership and this is your first time, you have an opportunity to join us for a second live today where we're doing a jewelry roadshow as well. So I am now going to first do that giveaway. Let's see if we can do it. And then we will do the mug giveaway as well. Membership gifting, good luck everybody. I'm gifting them right now. And this is totally random, done by YouTube. And we will see who our lucky recipients are. It will pop up right away. And now we are going to do the mug giveaway. So allow me to share my screen. And here it is, the giveaway tool from StreamYard with 38 entries. Good luck to everybody on this fantastic St. Patrick's holiday. It's not really a holiday, but it's a happy day, a lucky day. I'm going to count down from 10, and then we're going to hit draw. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and good luck to everybody. Let's see who our winner is. And it is Diane Van Lente. Congratulations. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Please email me at sundaebaubles@gmail.com so that I can ship that mug to you. Congratulations. All right, so we will have our next live for Extra Scoop today, and then in 2 weeks, we will be doing our next Sundae brunch. Watch for the polls because I am going to be polling you all with a couple of questions so that you can help inform what is up my sleeves for the next live. And I'm just going to catch up on the comments. I apologize that today is a little bit of a short video, but I need to prepare for the next Extra Scoop video. Congratulations, everybody. Have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. I think I am all caught up. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate the thumbs up sentiments. Thumbs up are awesome. It always helps anybody who's making YouTube videos, so it is appreciated. And I will see you all soon. As always, if you have any questions, get in touch. sundaebaubles@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.